Yeah, do the very gaspy, sighy dance move. So very, very much that.
That must have felt so good. So, let it out in such like a performative way. Oh, I bet it's so beautiful.
Yeah. I wish I could move my body without it breaking. I would be doing that all the time.
Oh,
honestly.
I wish that for you too.
Every time I see dancing, I'm like, that's so beautiful.
Oh. Hi, I'm Mother Suspiriorum.
No, I'm Mother Suspiriorum.
And we're the Mother Suspiriorum.
Next door.
No, we're the Ghouls Next Door, a media literacy show from the horror lens where we explore the real life, historical, psychological, and supernatural influences behind our cinematic fears and continuing our Satanic Panic series for the spookiest time of the year. We're covering Suspiria from 2018, the remake.
And sometimes our most terrifying and haunting thing is our own history.
That's true. That's what we often find.
Atrocities that we've had along the way.
That we had to learn from and grow from. Thinking more about the themes of the film, and it's a hefty one. Oh my god, it was like forever. I was like, we still going? It was like a new chapter, and I was like, how many chapters in this book? Is this Moby Dick? What the hell? And it keeps going, and I really didn't know if I would like it, because the original was just so trippy and weird for me that I didn't really have a great time watching that one. And I will say I didn't not enjoy myself this time.
Yeah, I would agree. I wish I did the historical context and research before we watched. I feel like it really would have just shifted the way I was watching it. And like, I didn't know what it was about at the level I think I needed to going in to fully appreciate it for what it was. And now that I know, I'm like, oh, I can like look back and be like, I think I appreciated it a lot more than I actually did while I was physically watching it, because I just didn't have the context. So hopefully after this episode, you've listened to all the context and you can go in and watch it and have like more appreciation than I did on onset.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially fans of the original, don't like the remake. Some people say, it's a watered down, like it just doesn't have the same flair. And I think it's just it is different.
It's just different.
You took the core message and we've changed it to a different genre, right? Like it's a different subgenre. It's got a different intention than the original had, but I think the spirit is still there and the lore and fantasy of it is still there. If anything, more overt than it was before. And it feels less tongue-in-cheek and way more grounded in its horror.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Why don't we hop into it and tell you about Suspiria? And specifically this one, because there's so much that's going on. So we do our best. So definitely let us know what you think of the film, what you took from it, and if you've have anything out. There's so much to say, like genuinely. So I'm sure you have something wonderful that you could share with us about it. And if you didn't like it, tell us why. That's interesting too. Is Suspiria, the 77 version, way more interesting to you?
Yeah.
Tell me about it. So Suspiria from 2018 is about a darkness swirls at the center of a world-renowned dance company, one that will engulf the artistic director, an ambitious young dancer, and a grieving psychotherapist. Some will succumb to the nightmare, others will finally wake up. And it's directed by Luca Guadagnino. And this Suspiria is a haunting exploration of power, control, and the horrors of fascism. Which is like, spoilers, I didn't know that. I was like, wait a second, what? Where are we? But it's because it is set against the backdrop of Cold War era Berlin in 1977. And the film follows Susie Banyan, same character name from the beginning, played by Dakota Johnson, who is a talented American dancer who joins the mysterious Marcos Dance Academy, led by the enigmatic Madame Blanc, which is played by Tilda Swinton, after escaping her over-religious family in the States. And as Susie rises within the company, she uncovers the dark secrets of the academy, including the disappearance of fellow dancer Patricia and the coven of witches that controls it. Madame Blanc is trying to gain control of the cult, wrenching that control from sickly leader Mother Marcos. Meanwhile, Dr. Klemperer, who's also played by Tilda Swinton, Patricia's former psychotherapist, investigates the sinister happenings, revealing connections to his own traumatic past. And as Susie becomes intertwined with in a dark ritual aimed at transferring the soul of the coven's matriarch Helena Marcos into her body, the stage is set for a violent climax that challenges the witch's plans and reveals Susie's true power. That's a lot, and it's a big mouthful because it's a long movie. It's like 3.5 hours. And it was, if I felt all 3.5 of them. And there is just a lot going on and a lot being explored, and way more than the last one. So I wanted to kind of dive in the differences between the two films. So A Tale of Two Suspirias, right? So Suspiria is notorious for its intense, disturbing imagery that plunges into the dark dynamics, power dynamics of Cold War era Germany, this one. And while Argento's original is a vibrant giallo masterpiece, bursting with surreal reds and a sensory nightmarish overload, enhanced by Goblin's aggressive soundtrack, Guadagnino's reimagining takes a darker, more muted approach, grounding the story in a moody, oppressive reality. Right? Here, violence isn't glamorized. Instead, it's haunting and raw, and it's accompanied by Tom York's, from Radiohead, melancholic score, which amplifies the film's serious and gruesome tone. Instead of being like very red and just like, oh, over dramatic, it's like, oh, people were hurting.
Yeah, it's definitely like the reds are there in the film covers and stuff, and like in the backups of things, but like it's definitely just more, it's supposed to feel heavier, I think, or like sadder.
Yeah, there is a lot of red, and I noticed that, like, a lot of characters who would wear red, especially who are involved in the cults, things like that, but they're very desaturated, because I feel like it's just that gloom and doom of the world around them that everyone is juggling with, like trying to continue on with their everyday life while also having to cycle through the information that you're being bombarded with about the outside world and how horrifying and unstable it is. And I can very much relate.
Yeah.
So I was like, I feel that, like, yesterday was really hard for me to disassociate enough to enjoy a silly TV show, because I was like, wow, the world is really rough. And so I think this film does a really great job of showing that struggle, the burden, of having to live two realities. In Argento's version, right, dance serves as an atmospheric backdrop to the vibrant, secretive world of witchcraft. They're very, like, the witch parts are in the background, and we get sprinkled with them until the end, when we're like, oh, this was witches the whole time. But with Guadagnino, he flips this, making the dance school's eerie secret a vehicle for exploring themes of guilt, trauma, and the lingering shadows of fascism through the overtly powerful coven. We see them act as witches the entire time, and to exact this power is very evident as well. And in his vision, dance becomes a powerful expression of control, linking the witches and their followers to a broader narrative about feminine authority and chaos, transforming choreography into a chilling manifestation of power. It is used as a ritual in their, machinations of evil, and to literally control the bodies of the people in their dance program.
Yeah, and I won't like cover it too much in my section, because that's like giving you like a whole primer on like before even World War II. But that was a big thing in the Nazi regime, was that they would use women as like positions of power to be the people to put other women in their place, essentially. That was like a big thing that they would do. Like the Weimar Republic was like pretty progressive, and the shift back was really brutal. So women, if they wanted to have any position of authority at all, or freedom even, would have to be these like wielders of the control, and like very harsh to the other women that they would interact with.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to get into that just a little bit, just about the compromises that people have to make with their own, like, because guilt is a very, very heavy theme in this film. Everyone is suffering from guilt in some form. I'd say except for Susie. I don't think she's regretting anything or feeling guilty about anything. The one last thing I wanted to say is that the dances between the two films are also very different, in that the first film is centered around ballet, which can be very structured and obviously very beautiful. And we've seen very remarkable ways that ballet can be used to express like someone's stature and place in the world with Us, Jordan Peele's Us. In the new one, we have more experimental dance, and that gives a bit more emotional. Like there's a lot of grounding, there's a lot of them being on the ground. And this almost like asexual sexuality, which is like just being one and with the world around them and doing what feel like, it's a lot about like, what do you feel, instead of like do the perfect pirouette, you know?
Yeah.
So that was like a very intentional change too, that some people love, some people hate.
Yeah.
That's his whole film. And some people love that was changed and some people don't. And I think that's just the way of the world, that some people really hate when you take something that they liked and you make it different. And then some people are like, it's cool, it's different. As we said, some of the bigger themes in this film is fascism, historical trauma, and guilt. And so because it is set in the Cold War era Berlin of 1977 and is the backdrop of political unrest and terror, this is significant. The film reflects on the lingering trauma of World War II and the Holocaust, with the School of Dance standing as a microcosm for Germany's struggles with its dark history. And in an incredible article that I found on Bad Critic titled The Rotten Wombs of Suspiria, they explain that, like the Coven, the city of Berlin is divided. Many young people are demanding retribution for the World War II crimes of their elders. And as the Cold War rages on, a series of political assassinations and kidnappings has thrown most of the city into chaos. There is retribution that is being sought after, and also a moving forward.
Yeah.
Like, we don't talk about it, we can just keep going. And that's literally what's happening with Madame Block versus Marcos. It's two different ways of handling what we've experienced, right? So several characters, such as Dr. Klemperer, embody the theme of guilt, specifically relating to their past in Nazi Germany and the atrocities of the Holocaust. And the search for redemption or resolution to this guilt is juxtaposed with the witch's pursuit of eternal power. And the article says, all of these characters are struggling to survive. They all have generational trauma, and they all feel righteous in their pursuit of power. For example, Madame Blanc, who at first is revered in the company. Mia Goth's character, Sarah, gushes over her, telling Susie that she is incredible. The way she transmits her work, her energy, when it shines on you, it's addictive. And she also says she kept the company alive through the war, when the Reich just wanted women to shut off their minds and keep their uteruses open. However, this admiration carries a dark undertone, as we never learn the lengths she went to for this survival, what compromises or allegiances that she may have had to make. While she's present herself as an empathetic mentor, Blanc's true agenda is manipulative, promoting empowerment while secretly orchestrating the sacrifice of her young impressionable students. And she definitely feels bad as it's happening, but she's also still doing it.
Yeah.
So how often has she done that, right? Her words are steeped in manipulation, focused solely on preserving her coven rather than the autonomy or well-being of her dancers. They all exist as one, microcosm, as opposed to specific individual people. And the article continues this theme of veiled corruption, saying the witches justify their loyalty to Marcos because she claims to be the reincarnation of their deity, Mother Suspiriorum. They talk of openings and rebirth, but they are only interested in maintaining the structures that already exist. And in the end, Susie, who had been prepared by the coven for a sacrificial role, shocks everyone by revealing her true identity as the actual Mother Suspiriorum. So, unbeknownst to Marcos and her followers, they have unwittingly unleashed a power beyond their wildest dreams. And transformed into Suspiriorum, Susie confronts Marcos, executing her for her heresy, and exacts brutal retribution on those who chose to follow Marcos over Blanc, resulting in a gruesome aftermath. And so Marcos and Blanc mirror the fascist propaganda that deeply affected generations of German women. The coven, having survived World War II, endured a regime that pressured women to bear children, viewing childlessness as a moral failing. And although the Nazi government had fallen by 1977, their twisted ideals of motherhood still lingered within the coven's practices. And that's what they're trying to hold on to. And again, maintain the power.
Yeah. And like what we're willing to sacrifice for like maintaining normalcy within your isolated spaces, where they're like, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing and I'm willing to sacrifice anything for that, including the people I love and care about.
Yeah. Like your leader is literally falling apart and dying, and you are willing to literally sacrifice young lives and bodies to maintain that. Maintain that thing that got you through some things, but we're no longer there, you know? So I think that's really what's like having Susie inherit that instead of in the end of the original Suspiria. You know, it's just so different. So this is not your mother's satanic panic, right? So in Suspiria, the eerie world crafted by Dario Argento's Three Mothers trilogy through his films Suspiria, Inferno, and Mother of Tears, they introduce us to the three mothers: Mother Suspiriorum, Mother Tenebrarum, and Mother Lacrimarum. These ancient supernatural forces are anything but nurturing, and instead they turn the concept of motherhood on its head, transforming it into a nightmarish spectacle of manipulation and control. And I did read some articles where people were like, you're a man, how do you feel about making a film that's supposed to be feminist because there's like women on screen? And you're portraying women as like negative? And he was like, yeah, but that is feminist. It's like, not like, you don't just make only good women. That's not what that exists. And I felt that really strongly, because it's something that I say often is like, when we put people of color into roles, it's like obviously not putting them into the same roles and just being very conscious of the way that we use them. But there's an empowerment of having like a protagonist and a villain be a person of color and doing it the right way. And the same thing with women. Like, I think it's great when women can be bad and also good, and like just you know, and for all the like somewhat erotic dancing that there is, it really did feel not so much sexual. It just felt very raw and personal, and so I never felt like it was a male gaze version of what that could have been. It very easily could have leaned into that, and I don't think so. So mild tangent just about feminism. But the film is filled with these terrible mothers, right? These bad women, right? With the coven serving as the most glaring example alongside Susie's religious mother in the States. So these witches have endured an oppressive system that sought to control their bodies, and this experience fuels their justification for doing the same to their students. Again, working to uphold these systems of power so that they can be the ones wielding it. Now it's their turn to be the ones in charge. In Suspiria, these captivating yet terrifying figures symbolize not just witches, but the very essence of destruction, showcasing the dangerous duality of power that lurks beneath the surface of creation. So I wanted to go over who these three mothers are. For anyone who, like me, as soon as you hear anything supernatural and lore filled, I'm like, tell me more. Who are they? What's their deal? So starting with Mother Suspiriorum, who's the central theme of this film, she is the mother of sighs, and Mother Suspiriorum represents the crushing weight of sorrow, despair, and the darker side of the human condition. As the oldest and most powerful of the three mothers, she looms over everything like an inescapable shadow, and in Suspiria, she takes the form of Helena Marcos, the coven's twisted leader, who feeds off the grief and despair of others, bending them to her will. Her presence is suffocated, embodying the heavy, inescapable sorrow that hangs over the characters, especially in the film's backdrop of historical trauma. And she's not just a witch, she's sorrow personified, a force that weighs down everything in her path. And later, when Susie is embodying her, we see how that can take the turn of releasing those sorrows as well. that it's important to have those in its grounding, but not everyone needs to be doing that
forever. Yeah. Like you can heal from it and move on.
Yes. Yeah. Then there's Mother Tenebrarum, who is the mother of darkness. She is the embodiment of fear, ignorance, and the unknown. Though she doesn't make an appearance in Guadagnino's Suspiria, her influence is deeply felt through the trilogy's lore. She represents darkness in every sense, literal and metaphorical, tapping into the primal terror that comes from not knowing what's lurking in the shadows. Her power is rooted in the fear of the unseen and the psychological horrors that come with repression and ignorance. This atmosphere of dread is woven into the film, and as the Dance Academy becomes an oppressive, suffocating place where the dancers remain blissfully unaware of the true sinister forces pulling the strings behind the scenes. Mother Tenebrarum is that creeping fear, always hiding just out of sight, waiting to be uncovered. Lastly is Mother Lacrimarum, who's the mother of tears, and she embodies suffering, emotional pain, and chaos. And as the youngest of the three mothers, she is intricately tied to the raw anguish that comes from tears and heartbreak. Wherever she goes, chaos follows, symbolizing the tumultuous nature of grief and the fragility of social order. Though her role is more prominent in the third film of Argento's trilogy, her shadow looms large in this version of Suspiria, where her influence resonates through the film's exploration of collective suffering, both personal and historical. She represents the uncontrollable tides of despair, reminding us that pain can tear us apart, not just individuals, but entire communities. With her presence, the chaos of emotion is palpable, creating a haunting backdrop of turmoil and tragedy that permeates the narrative. And overall, Suspiria is a slow burn journey into the tangled web of power, trauma, and identity, exploring the complex dynamics of feminine power as both a comforting embrace and a lethal grip. With the chilling influence of the three mothers, the film unveils the hidden secrets of its characters' collective suffering. The dance sequences are electrifying, serving as thrilling expressions of control that blur the lines between art and manipulation. And Guadagnino's Suspiria plunges into the exhilarating duality of creation and destruction, revealing how grief, guilt, and the haunting echoes of the past shape our identities in a chaotic world filled with existential dread.
Well said. Well said.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Do the very gaspy, sigh dance move. So very, very much that.
That must have felt so good. So, let it out in such like a performative way. Oh, I bet it's so beautiful.
Yeah. I wish I could move my body without it breaking. I would be doing that all the time. Honestly,
I wish that for you too.
Every time I see dance, I'm like, that's so beautiful. But it's okay. It's okay. Today in my section, we'll be delving into a lot of what Gabe talked about, but like the history behind it. So like you got a lot of like how that history was used to tell the story. In my section, we'll just be talking about like what the history was, the chilling legacy of the Nazi era and its enduring influence on popular culture. The horror of Suspiria and its disturbing connections to the darkest chapters of German history, essentially. A shout out to 3 articles where I got much of my information, specifically The Rotten Wombs of Suspiria by Bad Critic that Gabe spoke of, Selling Motherhood, the Nazi Attempt to Increase the Master Race by the U.S. Holocaust Museum, and finally Suspiria, a German history primer for the confused Suspiria viewer by Nate Jones. And I especially want to thank that last one because that's what led me to all the
yeah, and because we were.
Yeah. And yeah, it just brought me so much context to what I was viewing. And what's interesting is most of my college like history stuff like has to do with, or not most of it, but at least a good chunk of it was I covered a lot of Nazi Germany and World War II and World War I and like how that influenced England and the rest of Europe and also Germany. And I never really checked back in with Germany after that. So I was like, I know stuff happened after World War II. I couldn't tell you what most of it was. So yeah, I stopped learning about it afterwards into like modern times, what the heck was happening there.
I will say that not checking in with Germany after a war is what got us World War II. Yeah, because we didn't check in and we weren't like, hey, how you doing, buddy? After that first one, then they cooked up this. So checking in.
Also, they were like, the punishment that was delivered to Germany made it so that they had no ability to succeed after World War
that's
One
super
as
true.
well. So
yeah,
they
no
were
one's
like,
checking in.
yeah, no one checked in. They're just like, go ahead and die. It's cool. Bye. You'll be able to see the full list of sources that I used. I used like 20 plus. So you'll be able to see the full list if you would like to, some supplemental reading, etc., in our sources section on our blog if you are interested. So part one of my section is World War II before Suspiria. So to fully appreciate the depths of Suspiria, we first must understand the historical context that shaped its narrative. The Nazi era left a deep scar on Germany, one that continues to reverberate today. And the film's setting, West Berlin, is a stark reminder of the Cold War tensions and the lingering effects of the Berlin Wall. But beneath the surface lies a more sinister connection, the enduring influence of Nazi ideology. As we see in America, oppression and isms and hatred are not an individual problem, but a systemic one. You can remove the head, but a new one will grow back. And as I said, in college, I did a lot of research on World War II and how Germany transformed nationally from a previously somewhat progressive Weimar Republic into a very conservative Nazi Germany. And World War I has a lot to do with this, but we do not have time to get into all of that. But there will be there were essentially many social shifts that took place post World War I into World War II, specifically with nationalism and identity, essentially wanting to reclaim pride in being German again, which is what they largely lost in World War I. But that unfortunately transformed into genocidal motivations for World War II. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Nazi regime was its systemic abuse of children. And in an article that Gabe goes through as The Rotten Wombs of Suspiria from Bad Critic, they discuss the harmful legacy of Johanna Herr, a Nazi-era childcare expert, whose abusive teachings were designed to break the bond between children and parents, fostering a generation of emotionally detached and unempathetic individuals. Herr's methods, which included isolating babies and discouraging any forms of affection, led to several attachment disorders and generational trauma. Thinking to the parallels happening in the US with parents leaving babies to self-soothe, which was theorized to be one of the main causes of the increase in serial killers that led to many of the anxieties of satanic panic. It all kind of connects. And the text then draws a parallel to the film Suspiria, where the witches of Marco's Dance Academy exhibit similar abusive behaviors. The coven, having survived an oppressive system, justifies their manipulation and control of their students. Honestly, feeling like they pull from Heron's teachings and the cling to power, using that to like wield against the young people who are growing up. It just feels like very intentional. And the film portrays the cycle of abuse and the resulting generational trauma, emphasizing the corrupting influence of power and the perpetuation, I can never say that word, and the perpetuation of violence. Another chilling aspect of the Nazi ideology was its obsession with racial purity. They really took the I want to have pride in being German again to German is the best. And there's this obsession with racial purity. A kind of dystopian manifestation of this was to push women out of universities and society, as well as prevent LGBTQIA individuals from being their authentic selves, and instead have all women or femme-presenting humans be baby makers, or just women with uteruses, people with uteruses, be made baby makers. Kind of very similar to the rhetoric we see from the Republican Party in America today. In the article Selling Motherhood, the Nazi Attempt to Increase the Master Race from the U.S. Holocaust Museum, they explore the Lebensborn program, a Nazi initiative aimed at promoting the birth of racially valuable Aryan children to create a racially pure society. Established in 1935, the program provided maternity homes for unmarried women of good blood to encourage childbirth and adoption by SS families, specifically so that the women would not keep their babies, but that they could use them to have babies and then give those babies to prominent SS families, very much giving a
Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah. Despite the charitable facade, the program was marked by lies, cruelty, and kidnapping. Initially, many SS housewives refused to adopt the Lesbian-born babies on moral grounds, a challenge Himmler did not anticipate. However, as the war progressed, more families adopted children to replace those lost in battle.
Jeez.
And the program's propaganda painted an idealized picture of motherhood, aiming to remove any obstacles to childbirth and stigmatizing single mothers to align with Nazi ideology. Cough, cough, J.D. Vance. The legacy of Lebensborn is complex, with its impact still felt today through the descendants of those born in the program, and the impacts of these programs and ideologies bled into post-World War II Germany that had a generation of babies that were born in these conditions, essentially under these parental structures, and also just like the methods that they used to kind of detach the emotions of the babies and their parents, as well as the generation raised by those who protected these programs and allowed them to exist. Basically like built up and held up these institutions. Jones's article, the primer for German, or the German primer for understanding Suspiria, article provides a historical context for post-World War II Germany, focusing on the persistence of the Nazi influence and the societal reckoning that followed. Jones unpacks that the issues, stating that after the war, while high-ranking Nazis were persecuted in the Nuremberg trials, many lower-level Nazis remained in key professional roles necessary for rebuilding society, such as doctors, judges, and civil servants. This led to a society where Nazi beliefs were still prevalent throughout Germany. For instance, in 1946, 37% of Germans in the America zone, specifically, I think that was, I'm not going to say because I'm going to be wrong. In 1946, 37% of Germans in the America zone believed that Holocaust was necessary for their security. And similar sentiments persisted into the early 1950s. So Jones's article also highlights the delayed reckoning with the Nazi past. It wasn't until the early 1960s that the Nazi era was introduced into German school curricula, which influenced the youth who would drive the cultural shifts of the late 1960s. This generational awakening led to a stark divide between the younger generation and their parents, who had been complicit in or indifferent to Nazi atrocities. This tension is exemplified by Gudrun Ensslin, a founder of the Red Army faction, who saw the older generation as an irredeemable group and advocated for armed resistance. The setting of Suspiria in West Berlin next to the Berlin Wall underscores these historical tensions and the lingering impact of the Nazi era on German society.
I will say that even though it was like late that they introduced it into their school curriculum, America still ain't doing that right with their own stuff. So honestly,
they're trying to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's still a lot of problems in Germany. I'm not going to say that there aren't, but they, in terms of like teaching about the Holocaust, they have done, as far as like everything I've read about it and learned about it, is like they've made up for it a lot of the ways, and not made up for it. That's the wrong way of saying it, but do teach about it actively so that people can learn from it and heal.
Yeah, it's like fool me once.
Yeah, exactly. So the second part of my section is the historical backdrop for 2018 Suspiria. So Luca Guadagnino's 2018 remake of Suspiria is set against the rich and complex historical context of 1977 Berlin, a period marked by political unrest, social upheaval, and cultural transformation. I'm going to put my glasses on because that'll help me read better. Post-World War II Germany was a nation divided both physically and ideologically. The Berlin Wall, erected in 1961, became the most potent symbol of this division. It separated East Berlin, which was under Soviet control, from West Berlin, which was aligned with the Western powers. That's why they call it the American zone.
Yeah, so you're right.
Wall, yeah, I was right. Look at me. Okay. So the wall not only divided a city, but also represented the broader geopolitical struggle between communism and capitalism during the Cold War. The Berlin Wall's presence created a climate of tension and fear as families were split and the movement was heavily restricted. This is kind of like what I think the one man was dealing with in the film. Is that
Klemper,
yeah. So essentially, this division had profound social and psychological impacts on the German people, fostering a sense of isolation and oppression. The wall stood until 1989, when the political changes in Eastern Europe and the decline of the Soviet influence led to its fall, symbolizing the end of the Cold War and the beginning of German reunification. If you think about how recent that really was, the political landscape of today makes much more sense. And the Red Army faction and the German Autumn, which we see like as the backdrop of the film, you see like the events being played in the news. You have one of the girls in the dance company had run off to join them. And like, so just to give you the context of who they were and why they were doing what they were doing, the Red Army faction, also known as the RAF, also known as the Baader-Meinhof Group, was a somewhat radical leftist organization that emerged in West Germany in the late 1960s. The RAF sought to overthrow what they perceived as a fascist state and capitalist oppression, using violent means to achieve their goals. Their activities included bombings, assassinations, kidnappings, and bank robberies. And the German Autumn of 1977, which is when the film is set, was a particularly intense period of RAF activity. It was marked by a series of high-profile attacks, including the kidnapping and murder of former SS member Hans Martin Schleiler, and the hijacking of the Lufthansa Flight 181. The hijackers demanded the release of 11 Red Army faction members imprisoned in Germany, as well as 2 Palestinians held in Turkish prisons, and as well as $15 million as a ransom. These events created a climate of fear and led to significant government crackdown on terrorism. The state's response included increased surveillance, stricter laws, and a broader debate about civil liberties and state power. This response in many ways showcased why the RAF was taking these actions. They're very strict, they're very oppressive in their response to dealing with this activity. So the RAF actions and the state's response had a lasting impact on German society, contributing to a sense of disillusionment and questioning of authority. The period also highlighted the generational divide as younger Germans, influenced by the 1968 student movements and the revelations of their parents' involvement in Nazi crimes, sought to challenge the status quo. The radical left's influence extended beyond the political activism to the cultural sphere, and the 1968 student protests driven by opposition of the Vietnam War and dissatisfaction with West German government sparked a wave of cultural and social change. Young people, inspired by the counterculture movements in the United States and Europe, began to question traditional norms and values. And this period saw the rise of alternative lifestyles, communal living, and experimental art forms. The RAF's actions and the state's response created a climate of fear and tension, but they also sparked important debates about civil liberties, state power, and the role of violence in political struggle, like riots, work kind of mentality. The radical left's emphasis on anti-authoritarian leadership and social justice resonated with many young people, shaping their political consciousness and cultural expressions. And this really set the tone of Suspiria, focusing on artists and younger dancers that were being manipulated by the generation that survived and built power during World War II. The reasoning for their participation in protests twisted to be selfish and against what was best for the dance company and the coven. And the ending, where the quiet part was finally said out loud, the truth of what was happening and the history finally out in the open, was ready to be healed from.
Yeah, it's super true. Like the differences between the two generations is really evident. And even with like Patricia, who is the dancer that is rumored and what the girls are told ran off to be this, protester and a part of like a radical, right? She was actually going against the fact that they were trying to control her. And she even says like they control every part of her. They took all of these parts of her, even like her womb, essentially, right? And that's just a representation of what that generation was trying to do and trying to maintain and hold. And I think even in the way that the dance was made, so the dance at the end, the Volk, was a dance that Blanc had made during that regime and had, it saved the company, right? We don't know why or what was going on or what about it. But the fact that Susie is continuously trying to do her own version of it. She's always like, no, I want to be on the ground. I want to do this. Like, this is what it feels, this is what I feel. And Blanc is continuously fighting against her to be like, it doesn't matter what you feel, you have to do this. And the fact that Marco's in the end, when she's gearing Susie up for sacrifice, says you have to empty yourself, like till there's nothing left of you so that I can put myself into you. So it's just like no individuality. You have to perform and be what is expected of you, because that's what they had to do. They had to do all kinds of scary things. And now that people are being held accountable, it's scary. It is a scary thing. And so to see them actually get held accountable in the end is really quite beautiful.
Yeah. And like the use of the word Volk is also super intentional. That was from like the Primer article, where they like talk about how like that was the word used to describe the people. It was like their rallying cry under the Nazi regime to like be like, this is what Germany is, this is what it is to be German. So her changing it is like a big slap to the face of that, where it's like German identity is going to change and it's going to be more inclusive, and it's going to, you know, it's going to not be this is what Germany is, this Aryan race creepy awful time. We can just change it to change who we are and grow, instead of having to be this restricted, awful thing.
There's a big question too, just about the fact that she was American and she came over here, and she came from an oppressive American, like religious, like society that was also controlling her. They also had very specific roles that women are supposed to perform and behave like. And so the fact that she came from that and then came here and then turns out is the future is a big statement. And so I think, I think it's worth, eventually one day rewatching the original Suspiria and understanding and respecting it for what it was. And I think what people need to do is separate these films like it is not like it's not a remake so much as an inspiration of, we took the set dressing of what influenced Suspiria and we made something completely different with a lot of intentionality behind it. And when you see it that way, I think you can really enjoy it a lot more. I mean, hopefully for people who are doing it, but I do know like there are some people who just aren't going to like it, and it is weird and it is long. It didn't have to be that long. Some of it's like, oof. Yeah.
And I did look it up. It was 2.5 hours.
No, 2.5. It felt like 3.5. It felt like forever. It felt like my whole life. I was like, it's still going. 2.5. That sounds right. More like 17. Yeah, but that was Suspiria. If you've seen it, again, tell us what you think. It's quite the trip, and I think Dakota did a great job in it. I didn't feel it weird about her acting. She tried to do a lot of the dancing on her own, although like she's not a dancer, so there's only so much you could do with your body if it's not conditioned to move that way at such an age. So, but she did try. She did do a good amount of things on her own, which is admirable. And I highly recommend looking up things about the dances and just about the history. And this is another film that's juggling a lot, where I did feel that. I did feel it was juggling a lot. But I didn't feel as disappointed in its mismanagement of the several themes as I did with Maxine. So, yeah.
It is.
Well, that being said, don't get married.
Delete your kids. And if you have kids, don't leave them alone forever. And like, love them.
Don't let them cry it out,
Yeah, love them and give them affection and care about them. And teach them empathy.
Let's not Handmaid's Tale anybody.
Yeah, that also.
And if you don't want to have kids, that's also cool.
Yeah, do whatever you want.
Dude.
Your body is yours.
Scary.
And
yes.
Even though the country doesn't agree with that, hopefully we get it there eventually.
Be the Susie Bannion / Mother Suspiriorum that you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
But without the murder.
Or, no, I'm kidding.
Oppressive regime?
Yeah.
Meet demon. That's why I always get so sad after we watch one of those where it's just like, they don't exist.
Yeah.
They don't exist. There's not a being I can call out to. You know, those aren't real.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Give one to the little guy. Anyway.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.